Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Corey Webb, and I'm the Marketing Director here at TurnZero, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar titled Scaling Customer Success, Digital Strategies, ChatGPT, and Personalized Experiences. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you that we are recording today's session, and we'll be sending out a link to today's recording in a follow-up email tomorrow afternoon. Throughout the presentation, you're welcome to submit your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address as many questions as we can during the end part of this webinar. Now I'm pleased to introduce to you our speaker today, Lynn Tsoflias. Lynn has a background as a GTM leader at companies as Insightly, Aerostream, Microsoft, and LinkedIn. She currently consults and advises growth stage companies, some of which are backed by Warburg Pincus, JMI, and Omers. Since she helps build and scale CS teams, I'm excited to have her here today to talk to us about digital CS. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Lynn.
Thank you, Corey. I really appreciate that introduction. I also appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you today. It's always exciting for me to be part of a large group like yourselves. I really think of this as a customer success community. And so anytime I have an opportunity to talk with teams and individuals, leaders, it's always fun for me. I know I always learn whenever I present, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit of some of the knowledge and experience that I've gained over the last several years in customer success. So before we dive in, I would love to chat a little bit about myself so you can get to know me personally. I live in San Luis Obispo. It's a beautiful place to live, mostly sunny days. I don't like to tell too many people about it because I'm afraid everybody will move here. It's halfway between San Francisco and Los Angeles. I moved down from San Francisco a few years ago and love it. I get to be closer to family, like this guy, my nephew. We were in Versailles in March and April together, which was super fun. I personally love spending time with him, and I also love spending time with him when he'll come on a global experience with me. Something I love to do is travel. I've moved around a lot, and so one of the things I like to do is try to build communities wherever I go, whether that's locally through dinner parties or meetups, or even with communities like yourself. So this is an exciting part of a community that I get to be part of today. So thank you for that. Professionally, I have my own business. For the last 5 years, I work directly with companies, mostly SaaS, B2B SaaS companies, and I am an operating advisor with Warburg Pincus, but I also work with other private equity companies, and they're all growth stage companies. They're between about 10 million and 500 million, broad range, but that's my favorite stage of companies. I really sort of love to help these companies, mostly in the post-sale world. So customer support, customer success, and onboarding, really help them think about how to be operationally efficient and how to increase retention, whether that's gross retention, net retention, or improve gross margin. So that's what I've been doing the last 5 years now. Prior to that, I worked at LinkedIn before it was part of Microsoft. I also worked at Microsoft. I launched their dynamic CRM solution, worked on that pre-revenue through several hundred million, which was a fun job. I've also worked in Tanzania at the World Bank. I've worked in startups. I was employee 25 at Insightly, and I worked at a nonprofit called kiva.org, which provides microloans to small businesses around the world. So I've loved my career. Honestly, it's given me so much fun to be in roles like customer success, to work with nonprofits, to work with big corporations, and to now have the opportunity to share a few things of what I've learned over the years. So what we're going to talk about today is your digital strategy, right? Really is kind of scaling your customer success organization. And I'll first share with you why that even matters. Like, why have a digital strategy? The second thing I want to talk about is before you can even think about your digital strategy, you have to think about your foundation, right? Your foundation of how do your customers realize value? What does your segmentation look like? So I'll talk about that. Then your customer journey, your digital experience in that customer journey, and then a little bit about generative AI and ChatGPT. I now include this topic in every presentation, no matter what I'm talking about, because I think it can really help individuals product teams and teams be more productive and efficient. And then the last topic I'll talk about is winning as a team, right? It's impossible to be successful in customer success without working with your teams and driving results with your peer teams. So frankly, each one of these boxes could be a 1-hour topic in and of themselves, but I'm going to touch on each of them, at a kind of 100, 200 level. My goal in this is to provide you with both strategic frameworks as well as really deep into the tactics. I know when I was running customer success teams at really small companies, I needed to be in the tactics, but I also needed to be thinking ahead. So having strategy as well as firefighting tactics is extremely important. So my goal is to try and cover both of those areas today. So why does having a digital strategy even matter? Frankly, a lot of the companies that I work with don't have one. But today, I think more than ever, we're getting messages, and certainly my clients and where I work with PE companies, we're getting this message, right? You have to be more operationally efficient. You have to find ways to save costs. And so I think maybe in years past, we might just put a CSM or add 10 CSMs, and you could do that. Unfortunately, what will happen is you will start to serve your customers in the same way, right? So whether they're spending $100,000 with you or $10,000 with you, you might be putting a CSM, right, to help those accounts. And when you look at your cost to serve your customers, it's not efficient. It doesn't scale, and you simply can't do that and expect to grow. You might even be getting messages from your CEO or your CFO saying, hey, we're going to grow at 35%, but this year, your team, your customer success team, only gets a 10% investment. So you can't sort of continue to add people. You have to find things around tools, digital tactics to serve your customers so that you can really scale and be efficient. It's really, I think, important for you to understand whether you're an individual CSM or a director or a VP, what is the cost to serve your customers by segment? What's your profitability and gross margin? Even if you're not in these executive meetings, I think it's fair for you to ask your VP or your director or your leader to say, hey, could you share, like, how much does it cost to serve our customers? How are we doing? Like, are we doing well around this metric? Because it's really important for you, I think, early in your careers to really understand your numbers like net retention and gross retention, because to be a successful leader, which many of you may aspire to, you really need to understand those numbers. So your digital strategy matters even more now. It's no longer, to me, even optional if you need to operate in an efficient way, which I would say that's the message that we're getting today in the market. So as I mentioned, I want to talk about building a foundation. So before we even talk about our digital strategy, there's two key things I want to talk about, and those are value realization and segmentation. So it's really important, as basic as this might sound, to really sort of outline how do your customers, or frankly, in the sales cycle, how do they get value from your solution? What do you think are the things that they can do to be successful using your solution? Maybe it's increasing sales. Maybe it's increasing their productivity. Maybe it's keeping the solution safe from cyber attacks, right? What are those, what I'll call value pillars for your solution, where your customers can achieve outcomes? You have to be able to articulate this, whether it's in a high touch, white glove experience or your digital experience. And you need to do that in the sales cycle and then execute it in the, what I call post-sale experience, the customer experience. So you have to be on the same page with sales, and you have to define those pillars and frankly track them in a CSM tool so that when sales closes a deal, they can't close a deal unless they've selected a value pillar. And I'll tell you what that means. in just a second here. And that this value pillar allows you to personalize your customer experience and enable your customer's success. So what I mean by that, and this is just an example, and this is an example of someone that I work with, a portfolio company. I want to give credit to Kim Tran. She's Vice President of Customer Success. Her value pillars that she's defined sit across the top, right? The solution, she works on a security and compliance solution. And it's really about simplicity and visibility, compliance and continuity, risk mitigation. I'll let you kind of read across there. These are the things that when sales is selling, they talk about one of these or all of these or three of these value pillars when they're selling. When they close a deal, they have to select which of the value pillars that matter to the customer. And then in turn, the drivers, in this case, I'm going to choose the reduction in risk. From there, you create a success plan, value engagements, and a playbook, and verified outcomes. This is a lot of information. What I want you to remember are two things here. What are the value pillars of your product, right? What are the things that customers get value out of by using your solution? And then the outcome. What is the metric? Is sales going to increase by 10%? Are you going to be 20% more secure in your solution by using it? Are you going to be more productive as a company? Are you going to cut costs? And really being able to measure that. You have to be able to do this if you expect to keep your customers. One of the messages that I'm hearing a lot, I would say with all of my clients, is our customers are, I mean, they're not all churning, but some of them are saying, hey, we don't have enough budget, or we're not seeing the value that we expected by signing up for your solution. So you're 6 months into a renewal or an annual contract, you're up for renewal in 6 months, and your customers are saying, I don't see value. That is something that needed to be addressed, frankly, in sales and when you started to work with the customer. So this is just an example of what I describe as really sort of helping your customers realize value, regardless of if the experience is digital or high touch. And you need to lay this out from the very beginning, track it in your CRM and track it in your CS platform. So that's level one of your foundation. The second thing that you need to do in your foundation, before we can even get to the digital strategy, is your segmentation. So oftentimes what I'll work with clients on is segmenting their customers, right? So let's say they have 1,100 customers, roughly that's the example here, but how are we going to treat those customers? We can't treat them all the same. Some of them are spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Others of them are just spending, $10,000. And so there's some in the SMB segment, there's some in the small business segment, there's some in the mid-market, and there's some in the enterprise. In the enterprise, you can justify a white glove experience. Maybe in the lower two segments, you can't, but it's really important to understand which of your customers and based on what criteria. That criteria can be, how much are they spending with you today? What is their potential to spend, right? You might have a big brand customer that's only spending $25,000 to you, but there's lots of room to grow. You would want to put them in the enterprise segment. So you want to understand what are those high value customers, because they're spending a lot of money with you today. They can spend a lot of money with you in the future. And then you might have these small customers, a huge number of them, like 1,000. You can't ignore them, but you can't sort of put CSMs on all of those accounts. So that's when you really start to think about, what is my engagement going to look like across each of my segments, enterprise, mid-market, and small business. Oftentimes when I talk to clients, they think of that digital experience is just for small business, when really I think of it as it can be really used across all segments. Now, maybe small business is only digital with a little bit of a CSM touch, maybe quarterly, maybe just during onboarding. But in the enterprise, maybe it's mostly handholding, but there are monthly email communications, digital touches like that, or digital touches like in-app queues. So really sort of laying out your segmentation, deciding what your digital strategy will be for each of these segments is really important. So now you have your foundational things. How do your customers realize your value? Those were the first few slides I covered. And then how are we going to segment our customers so we know how to treat them? Often what I say is the customer experience should be the same, but how you deliver it might be different. You might deliver it through a person or you might deliver it digitally. So now what I want to do is touch on the customer journey. Hopefully all of you have something where you're laying out your customer journey. What I like to think of is the journey is your process for once a prospect becomes a customer. So in sales, I think sales does an amazing job. They always have a great process, right? There's a lead, then it's qualified, then it's you demo to them, you have a negotiation, it goes to contract. You have these very specific stages with activities and metrics that move it through the pipeline through a closed deal. Similarly, the customer journey, I think of that as our process once a prospect becomes a customer. So hopefully you have something like this where you have an onboarding phase, you have an adoption phase, expansion, and renewal. Yours might look a little bit different. In fact, expansion might cut across the top of these three pillars. You might see expansion where you're adding licenses and solutions during the onboarding phase, during the adoption phase, during the renewal phase. That will vary by business. What I think is important is that you just have these phases and you have a way to measure each phase, whether that's time to value in onboarding, the completion of your sticky features, and I'll explain what that means in a second. Product adoption, health scores, NPS, again, it will vary, but having metrics by phase and by segment is extremely important. So I'm going to go a little deeper in this right now. And what I've laid out is just a high level customer journey by segment. And I did not add pillars in here. I'm going to talk through what that means because it would have been an extremely busy slide. But basically what you, again, just if you don't have a journey, just start with it. Start with it within your team and the customer success team. Once you've established that, start shopping it around and collaborating with your peers, because your customer journey actually begins when your prospects even touch your website, your sales teams talk with them. You want it to be a consistent experience. If sales is talking about certain values, pillars of value, you want to make sure you're both talking about them in the same way. And so really sort of just laying out that basic customer journey. And then the next step is thinking about it in terms of segments. So like I said, in the enterprise, look at the top half of the slide here, you might have an onboarding experience that includes a project kickoff meeting. You might have 6 onboarding sessions that is delivered by a CSM. You might do a business review every quarter. You might do benchmarking and you might talk through that benchmarking with a CSM involved. So I'll call that the high touch model. In the low touch or the digital touch, all of this might be, or 90% of it might be automated and done with digital tactics. Maybe just an onboard, a 6 series email communication that describes the features and the pillars that your customers should be executing on during onboarding. And that is all conveyed through 6 emails. And maybe if you see that your customers aren't using the application the way you want, you might introduce a CSM to help them get started. And then going forward in your digital experience, you might add things like in-app queues. Maybe you use churn 0 for this. If you see that the customer hasn't logged in, or maybe they're using 5 features, but you want them using feature 7 and feature 6. And so you introduce that through in-app queues, maybe showing them a video or showing them an FAQ to get them started. So you can see, and I won't go through everything, but this is just an example of how you might use your digital tactics like emails, in-app queues, a community, which I'll talk about in a moment, renewal notifications, to really sort of help guide your customers, those customers maybe they're only spending $10,000 with you, guide them through your customer journey so that they get onboarded they realize value, you expand them, and you're able to renew them. Oftentimes, this is not able to be done just through digital. What I say is you sort of have to figure out when to introduce a CSM, when customers need to help, maybe do targeted and personalized campaigns around usage and value pillars to get them to do more with your application. I know when I was a user of Zendesk at one point, one of the things that they did digitally, which I thought was great, is they showed me in email a benchmarking report of how I compared with my peers and where I am on what they called a maturity model of the usage of Zendesk. And I found that hugely valuable. For customers that I'm going to guess are their enterprise customers, they actually deliver that benchmarking report through a CSM. So you have these sort of different ways of touching your customers, different ways of showing them value. And in fact, I highly recommend that people use digital tactics even in the enterprise, right? So there's no reason not to use in-app queues with enterprise customers. There's no reason to not send monthly email communications to your customers, whether they're small or whether they're large. One of the things that I found tremendously valuable when I was at LinkedIn and I was running the Sales Navigator existing customer team, one of the things we had to do and my team did not like is we had to enter 5 contacts into a CRM application. Well, lo and behold, we loved it because once we did that, our our marketing team could then begin sending the marketing messages and the marketing machine so that we had 5 contacts now that were aware in the company that we were using Sales Navigator. And so these digital tactics are valuable both with small businesses as well as the enterprise. And in some cases, big companies would prefer digital tactics like, hey, can I do that onboarding via video at night? Versus I don't have time to meet with a CSM during the day because I'm in meetings. So really sort of playing around with these digital tactics and figuring out where they fit and doing that in a personalized way, both in this small business, frankly, mid-market and enterprise, I think you'll find tremendously valuable and really sort of help drive that adoption and frankly, expansion into your customers. So I'm just going to share very specifically what I did when I was a VP at Insightly. I was leading the customer success team. I was employee 25. And frankly, I had to use digital from the get-go because the customer base, we had over 1 million users that we were thinking about. It was impossible for me to hire enough headcount. So from the very beginning, I had to think about my digital programmatic strategy. So the first thing I figured out was, working with marketing and sales, why are people signing up for this solution? It was a CRM application. One of the reasons, of course, was to increase sales and to make their processes more consistent. So I'm just giving one example of, other people signed up because they wanted to make organize their projects more efficiently. I might have modified this a tiny bit, not a lot, if they had chosen different value pillars when they signed up for the solution. So the first thing I did is I basically defined what I would call the sticky features. Those are the features, again, that connect to the value pillar that you want your customers using from the get-go, because that gets them committed to your solution. And you want them to do the features that are the most valuable to them, and as well as commit them to your product. And what I mean by that is they do things in the solution that makes it harder for them to take it out. So if in my case, I knew importing contacts into the CRM solution, setting up workflow processes for pipeline, integrating the CRM application to financial applications, setting up other integrations, which I won't elaborate on right now, we don't have enough time, and downloading the mobile were the key things that I wanted them to do, frankly, in the first 30 days, ideally the first 14 days. I knew if they were going to do these things, that we were going to keep these customers. So I anchored on the features that drove the value that they were looking for. I then doubled down on onboarding. And what I mean by that is all customers got that welcome email about welcome to the team, the Insightly family, not about features, but just, hey, welcome, we're excited to have you as a customer. And then we sent out a series partnering with marketing of onboarding email communications over a 14-day period, highlighting the features, the resources, the community. And only in that fifth and sixth and seventh email did we ever introduce somebody if they weren't setting up the features that we wanted them to set up in the beginning. So we used onboarding and what we called self-service to get customers going. And then we doubled down on all of our efforts on onboarding, but also all the efforts like in-app queues were driving customers to these features, the knowledge base, the videos, the community, all rallied around these particular features and the value pillar that they chose to get them to use a solution. I was able to predict very easily who we would keep and who we would lose in the first 30 days of their sign up. So very tactical discussion there, but hopefully gives you just an idea of how to think about your value pillars, your segmentation, your customer journey, and then all those sort of tactics within your customer journey and the value pillar connected to them, and then how to, as an example for me that I used here, how to actually do that for each of your businesses. Again, this will vary dramatically. I'm going to talk about community in a moment here. A community, I'm an infomercial for community. I love it. I think it's a tremendously beneficial tactic for users, but for some businesses, it just doesn't make sense. One of my clients is actually in the legal space. Lawyers will never use a community. So you have to think about which of the tactics, whether it's in the previous slides I talked about or community right now, what really makes sense for your users. Maybe some of them are going to learn more through videos and you want to use videos. Maybe others will learn through just FAQs, and it's something you can point them to in your in-app queues. So I want to switch gears and build on what I just talked about around community. One of the things that I think is tremendously powerful in our world today is leveraging a community where you can bring together your customers to connect with you and to connect with other customers. Connecting customers with other customers, creating advocates, is an extremely powerful tool for your business. For obvious reasons, a customer advocate is more powerful than, frankly, a salesperson selling your solution. So if you were thinking about launching a community, which I will tell you is a monumentous effort. When I did this, and I give credit to my community manager, Brenda Law, who's an amazing community manager, you have to be strategic about it. Think about what are your objectives for doing this. You can't launch a community without a community manager to moderate it. You have to know exactly who your target audience is. Some people use community for prospects. I used it for existing customers. Prospects certainly joined at times, but it was really existing customers that we were focused on. And we used it to drive retention and for customer support. And I'll elaborate that on a second on the details because I want to go through this first. And then you sort of want to understand, what is the value? Why would your customers even come to this community? It's often where you might point them to in your digital experience, but you have to give them a reason to show up in that community. You have to really figure out what problem are you solving for. Again, you can't say, hey, we need a community. You really have to be clear about what's the right problem. I've seen people start communities, then fail, and then they think community is useless. And I'm talking specifically about online communities. And then think about a platform that you want to use. There's lots of platforms out there to manage a community. How you're going to measure the success of this community and how are you going to launch it? So these are the key things that I thought about. I actually think CMX Hub does a great job, and I've pointed you to the resource here. It's a tool that will help walk you through why and how you would want to launch your community. And you might even decide it's not the right thing. So to be really specific about what that means, When I did this, and again, credits to the community manager, she was the one really leading the effort on this. So we were partners. We really thought about what was our goal in launching a community. The first thing we wanted to do is to provide customer support globally. We had over 1 million users all over the world in places like Fiji. We had them in Australia. We had them all over the place in Europe, South America. And we wanted to be able to meet sort of customers where they're at and provide support globally. We also wanted to drive engagement with customers so that they could connect on their specific similarities. Maybe they wanted to connect because both of them were chocolate businesses and they wanted to kind of share, best practices. Some might be in the same geography and they wanted to connect. So that really sort of peer connection was important. And then last thing we want to do is centralize feedback around product. So all of these things, again, I come back to your sort of digital experience. Do these things matter for you if you launch your community? And you might have a different goal. You might have, hey, we want to just bring in new customers. I've seen marketing run communities. So different things to think about. Who's your audience? What are your goals? I used Zendesk. Our support team actually used Zendesk. We were using it as our ticketing system, but we also used it for our community management tool as well. And then thinking about how did we want to measure the success of our community? We wanted to talk about, we wanted to understand engagement. How many questions were being posed? How many questions were being answered? How many users, both new and existing, were coming into our community? How many times, how much time did they spend there? And then how many of them were giving product suggestions to be voted on? Then, so there's a bunch of things you can measure. These, I think, are some of the key ones. But again, it varies based on what your objectives are of your community. And then what is your launch plan, right? So think about how would you launch, in my case, I could not launch a community and say, hey, 1 million users, come on in. You really had to be thoughtful and strategic about how we launched our community. So we recruited our power users first. We knew from the usage stats who were our power users, who would we call sort of innovators, really sort of using our product, not just 5 features, but really sort of in there. They were advocates. They were promoting our solution. They were high NPS customers. And so we used them and invited them to come into the community first. We built out all of our content. We put the knowledge base in there. Basically, as I say, you have to have the party going before you sort of let everybody in. And so after we had our power users in, we allowed our paid users in and then our free users in. So that then we had a very large group of users, and Brent and our community manager was managing the entire community. So there was always conversation going on. There was always best practices going on and being shared. As part of that, we actually recruited what we called ambassadors. We had a hero program. So we recruited customers. These were our power users who could actually serve as customer support and answer questions, right? Because our team, our customer support team was in San Francisco. We wanted to be able to support customers 24/7. We couldn't do that with headcount, hiring more support people. We did that by hiring what we called customers, and we used them. They had to be experts. We trained them to just answer what I would call tier 1 questions. They were never troubleshooting on the community. We also did things like contests to make it fun. We obviously shared, we never launched a new feature without getting people ready on the community. It was the go-to place for getting people ready on new features. It was our go-to place for onboarding. It was our go-to place for keeping up to date on solutions. So really sort of having a community where you can drive people to have your latest information so that they know how to use your solution. They know how to get the latest and greatest information on the category that your solution is in was tremendously valuable. So hopefully from that, you've gotten a few tips on how to launch your community. And now I'm going to switch gears. Although, Corey, do we want to take any questions? I think we're actually doing pretty well on time.
I will save some of them for the end, but we do have a question since we were just talking about community. Olivia asked, did you pay advocates to help with customer support within the community?
Good question. We did not. Basically, it was like a give-get program. And so people became heroes. Some people call them ambassadors, again, around the world. It was a give-get program where we basically put they were given a badge. So everyone knew they were an expert. They had to go through training. They then, we gave them swag. We gave them early previews of the product. For some people, we gave them a case study. We sometimes promoted their company. So it was a give-get. And honestly, some people just love the honor of being an ambassador. It was good for their brand. Mm-hmm. And so it turned out to be just a great program. And frankly, unbiased. We don't want to have to pay people in that scenario. In your scenario, you might decide that is needed. They then committed to a certain number of days to be in our community answering questions. Our moderator was great. She wasn't awake 24/7, but she would watch hey, who was a good ambassador and expert so that we knew they could answer those tier 1 questions properly. And in fact, we positioned it such that you actually got a faster response time in the community than you did on the email queue support.
Great. Oh. If you want to continue on, I'll save the other questions.
The others to last? Okay, yeah. Great. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears. So I now believe I mentioned this when I started. In every presentation I do now, I incorporate a little bit of generative kind of AI and ChatGPT. I'm no expert. We're all learning, I think, together right now. As early as today, there's a new announcement. I can't even keep track sometimes. I try and stay on top of the important things that will make me productive in my job. And there's 3 ways to think about generative AI and ChatGPT. So one is around product innovation. So for example, you all probably know Churn Zero has AI capabilities within the product, right? Your product teams are likely working on some type of AI oriented features or capabilities to make your product better for your customers. I am not going to talk about that today. The second pillar is around what I would call just individual innovation. How can I be productive, frankly, turbocharge how I create content or am more productive or save time? As an example, when Corey and I were working on this session, I actually used ChatGPT to help me write the session. I don't like writing. Some people are great writers. If it's not one of my skills, I have other skills, but writing isn't one of them. It actually takes me a long time. But with ChatGPT, and I can explain how I did it. I basically explained, I'm a customer success executive. I am doing a 1-hour session to customer success managers, directors, and leaders. You're my audience. And I'm going to do it on the digital customer experience. Write me a session descriptor. And it did in a nanosecond. Now, it's not perfect. I had to edit it, but I probably now did it in an hour instead of a lot longer. So I'll give you some examples. That's what I'm going to talk about today. But I also want to mention the third way to think about generative AI and ChatGPT. This will be more at a team level. I think there are, and you've probably read about them, there's all kinds of ways, it could have, implications for how teams work. As an example, it could take 40 hours to create sort of 1 hour of training. With ChatGPT, that's going to be cut down to probably an hour. So there's going to be ways I think that's going to affect your team. And I think getting ahead of this and learning a little bit about ChatGPT today and other innovations around generative AI will help you. Again, we're all learning this together. And I see this as a way to continue, I think, an initial sort of discussion and how we'll sort of work with these tools to make us more effective in our jobs. So before I continue, as I joke, I used to be a teacher in another life, and this was in Greece many years ago. There's a couple ways to make sure people are paying attention. One is cold calling, which I cannot do today because there's so many of you out there. And the other is class participation. So hopefully you will all participate in this survey where I'm basically, and let me see if you can, I'm going to move, maybe, oh, good, I can move it. You can see the question, and you can see it on the survey too. How often do you use ChatGPT today? And frankly, if you said never, I wouldn't be surprised. Some of you might wait and see how it plays out. It is changing, honestly, daily, weekly, and maybe kind of waiting isn't a bad approach. I would recommend you get like a little bit engaged. Sometimes you dabble here and there. Maybe you're so in it, you're doing it weekly, maybe even daily. I'd be impressed if you're doing it daily. 10% of you are, so maybe you can share some of your insights when we get to the questions at the end of the session. So excellent. We have about 20% who haven't used it. Totally fine. I would recommend you go to ChatGPT and do sign up for a free account, right? It's free, easy. Sometimes, great, 45%, that is awesome. Weekly, great, we have some power users in the weekly, daily bucket. Okay, daily, impressive, 10% of you are, so awesome. I'm thrilled that there's some good engagement around ChatGPT. So I'm going to share the results. Actually, you can see them, I think. I think we can all see the results from the survey. I'm going to keep going. That helps me sort of calibrate kind of where all of you are on this. So thank you for sharing. What exactly can ChatGPT help you do at a high level? I'm just going to touch on these, given most of you are sort of moving past the never stage, but it can help you do things around research, generating ideas, creating and summarizing content. Frankly, Code Interpreter just got launched about 2 weeks ago. You can analyze data, which is game-changing. And it can help you kind of do all kinds of things around customer service and interpreting images. This is not an exhaustive list, but it is some of the things that you can do. I'll also mention, you also probably know there's a difference between ChatGPT 3.5, which is free, and ChatGPT 4.0, which is $20 a month. Highly encourage you sign up for the paid version. It's only $20 a month and well worth it. But free, as I say, is good enough. Give you a little warning here. Be mindful. I personally today do not put any customers' information. Like I have spreadsheets I would love to analyze. I don't put it in there unless I've stripped out anything that's remotely confidential. That's my experience. I have another peer much more aggressive on this. So I would suggest you work with your companies to decide, what are your appropriate kind of protocols around security and legal issues. You may not want to be even touching this. Your companies, I have some security companies there, they're not touching this right now. So what I want to do is I just want to share a structure of a prompt. And so again, I'm focusing on how you can work on this as an individual by putting prompts into ChatGPT and helping you do your work a little bit faster. I gave the example of the session descriptor. It's very simple, but it saved me a lot of time. So when I structure a prompt, and I'll show you what this means, we're going to do a quick little ChatGPT session. You should describe your role. When I was talking about the session descriptor, I described my role that I want ChatGPT to help me with. I'm a customer success executive. I am going to talk about what my company does, right? And for me, it was I'm a customer success advisor and consultant. And then I'm going to explain what I wanted it to do. The example that I gave, it was a session descriptor. I described the audience, which was you guys, the style that I wanted it no longer than, 150 words, use bullets, and then I refined it and iterated it. I'm going to show you an example so this doesn't feel like gibberish. But some people, when they use ChatGPT, might get frustrated because if you're just like, hey, give me a session descriptor, you're going to get a bunch of garbage and you're not going to find it useful. So I think of it, my peer gave me a good description of this. Think of it as a helper, like a person. So let's say Corey and I we were assigned a project, right? Corey and I are different people. And so if our boss gave us a project and we went off and did it, we would come back with a different answer. It doesn't mean either of us is wrong or right. We're different people. We think in different ways. And that might sound frustrating, but the same thing applies with ChatGPT. Corey and I could do the exact same prompts and we will get different responses. But this is where you sort of teach the prompt in specifics by iterating on the prompt to get what you want. So it might feel like work. It is, but I would argue that it makes you more efficient and faster by teaching the prompt to do what you want it to do. So I'm going to switch gears. You can use this prompt later. I'm going to do an onboarding email series, something very basic. Let's say in that onboarding series that I talked about, marketing didn't have time to help me because oftentimes marketing is really focused on new business and not existing customer business. And so let's say as a customer success manager, I have to write that email, that 3-part email communication on onboarding. Like I said, I don't love writing. So I am going to use ChatGPT to help me out. So I am switching gears here. I'm going to reshare my screen and hopefully everybody now, can you see ChatGPT?
Yep, we're good to go.
Okay, great. Thank you. And so I'm going to take that prompt that you just saw. I have basically described myself. I'm an onboarding manager. Actually, why don't we put a customer success manager at a B2B company. I added, actually, it's called Simple Practice. They sell an electronic health record solution to small businesses. And so I'm going to ask ChatGPT to just create a series, 3 personalized emails that guides them through kind of step-by-step how to set up and configure Simple Practice solution. And then I've said in the last sentence there, be persuasive, be short and to the point, and encourage users to engage. That's a little bit on style. So I just hit enter and I'm in ChatGPT 4. It basically, just from that simple prompt, starts to write my onboarding communication, just 3 emails. And it welcomes them. I'm going to scroll back up here. Basically gives them a welcome, decent start, excited to have them on board, talks about the features, and basically signs it. Pretty short, nothing fancy. This might be the second email. Now goes into more of the details on which features they want them to use. Now, I have to be an expert to be able to know, is this right or wrong, to guide ChatGPT to get me where I want. So that was email 3. Pretty good, not great, but we'll give it pretty good. Then I have the last communication that this produces. Now, all of this looks pretty basic, and you say, Lynn, I could probably write this just as fast. That's fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to refine this, because this is where I think it's important. Whoops, am I still sharing? Let me move this over. That you learn to kind of refine your search. So I'm just going to do, I could have written that one in, but let's just do, that looks great, but I want more details. And actually, I would like you to use bullets, easier to follow. So I give it that instruction that it likes, that I liked what I saw, but I want more detail, right? So it's going to give you more detail. See, here come the bullets. I can then verify, is this correct? Now, one of the things you'll notice, I don't really like it. It's talking too much about features. And I'm scrolling through here quickly. I'm getting email 2. Again, I'm getting more details on setting up scheduling, documenting, billing. This is too feature oriented, right? One of the things I talked about was in the beginning was value pillars, right? What are those values that I want? How do customers realize value? So I want to guide ChatGPT a little bit more. And I'm basically going to say, let's add, and I'm just copying and pasting it so you guys don't have to watch me type. Now I want you to add this is how our customers, simple practice, get value out of using our solution. Helps them run their practice just like they want, helps them find the care really easily, and then it's flexible. So now it takes the previous communications, which I've told them, hey, that's pretty good, keep going now. It's going to now incorporate more of the benefits at the bottom, right? So did it a little bit here. I would have liked a little bit more. Let's see what it does on the second communication. Now it starts to talk about the portal, how they can find care. I'm going to give this a pretty good. I feel like I would have to refine this search a little bit more, but hopefully this starts to give you an idea of how you can use ChatGPT, give it a prompt, teach it, tell it if it's going okay, refine, hey, do I want it in bullets? Do I need more details? Do I want to focus on benefits? And really kind of show it how it can help you. This was a really simple example, but there are all kinds of ways. I actually used ChatGPT to analyze some churn data to recap all those qualitative comments that used to take hours to code and find out what were the common themes. Now I can do that very, very quickly by just dropping in that data, again, without specific customer information, to really kind of recap and help me be efficient in my job. So I'm going to wrap up. Hopefully that was helpful, a little quick demo, but hopefully just gives you some ideas on how to think about creating your value pillars, segmenting your customer journey, digital, how to use ChatGPT. And then I'll just close with, I close with this slide all the time now, is really how do you win as a team? Even in the scenarios that I talked about in this whole session, I talked about partnering with finance to understand cost to serve. I talked about partnering with sales to align your value pillars. I talked about marketing to get your digital experience sorted out. Training was in there with onboarding communications. It's impossible to separate these things. And so I use this slide all the time when I feel there's a customer success team pushing a boulder up the hill by themselves, trying to improve churn, net or gross retention. So really sort of rallying together as a team, I think, is so important to be successful and to make your customers successful. So with that, I think we'll switch over to questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lynn. So we do have a few questions that have come in, and I'd like to invite the rest of you to please submit your questions now, and we'll get to as many as we can over the next few minutes. So our first question is, what is your recommendation on a CSM to customer ratio? And I wonder if that changes as we were talking about digital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's a question I get so often. I will tell you a range, but honestly, it's like asking me how much is the price of a house. And so I'm going to be broad, and then I'll help you be specific. The range that I have seen is 2 million to 6 million. Now that's the revenue range. I know you asked me for accounts. I will give you a rough range for accounts, but this answer only matters if you outline what does your CSM do. So if your CSM does customer support, they do a renewal, they do onboarding, my answer is going to change dramatically. So I'm just giving you a rough number. I wouldn't go run and do it. The enterprise might be 15 to 30 accounts. In the mid-market, it might be 50 to 70 accounts. In small business, I don't even do that, right? Because I introduce CSMs intermittently. I have a pool of CSMs, but I really want to reiterate, you have to go through an exercise that I call capacity planning. You get in a spreadsheet, you list out what your CSMs do, and ask them to go into this spreadsheet and how many hours do they spend doing it? Do they spend 10 hours doing a QBR? Do they do 10 hours working on a PowerPoint presentation a week? You have to really sort of quantify, because I'm telling you, they're going to spend hours on things you don't even know. And then that model spits out the number of accounts they should manage. So I get that question all the time. It's a great question, but I really encourage you to really go through that exercise I just outlined before coming up what's the right one for you.
Awesome. That makes sense. Our next question does touch on community. So how big or how many customers do you need to have before launching a community? If you don't have the headcount, and I guess a secondary question, if you don't have the headcount to have a manager, a community manager, what are other options?
I mean, first I would decide, because one of the things I heard in the question was if you don't have enough customers. If you don't have enough customers, a community may not be the right strategy for you, right? So an exact number is hard to pinpoint other than to say, when you reach a point of your headcount, you keep adding headcount because you get more and more customers. At some point, you go through that cost to serve, right? Does it make sense to put this $100,000 resource on a customer that only spends $10,000? And now I've given them 150 accounts. Are they really going to make an impact? So it's really a business question to kind of think about, is it the right strategy? And you might not like this answer. If you don't have somebody that can manage it, I don't know that I would do it. I have seen so many messes where you can have customers who are really sort of making noise, or frankly, they're not even customers. You don't even know where they came from. They're not following their policies, and you want to be able to ban them from your community. So it just might not be the right time. And frankly, sometimes waiting is more than fine.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Our next question is, do you have any tips for transitioning from a one-to-one model to a digital strategy for customers without it being a poor experience?
That's a great question. I really like that question. It's very thoughtful because sometimes what customers will do, I've seen businesses do this, they just switch off all of a sudden, go, you no longer can call us. And so I'm going to give you the example of Insightly, and you're going to have to bear with me. I'm going to step over because my power cord became unplugged and I see I'm low on battery, but I'm going to keep talking. As I say, you have to strategically plan how you migrate over to customers. You have to think about almost positioning it as a better thing. And so what I mean by that is when I was launching the community, again, Brenda, she's amazing. She launched this community and we were taking away the ability for customers to email us through customer support. We, in fact, were taking it away completely. And they told us that they would their only way to get support was through the community. What we did is we positioned the community as a value add. We said to them, you will get faster response on the community than you do in the queue. Sometimes they had to wait 8 hours. That's terribly long. In the queue, in the community, they got a response in 2 hours. And so what I say is try to position it as a valuable thing if possible. And there's always benefits to some kind of change. And I would always say, pick the right time to do it. Maybe at the renewal is a good time. Maybe experimenting with new customers because they don't know what it was like before, and seeing how it goes with new customers, work out the kinks versus your existing customers, which has been with you so long. So positioning something as valuable, picking the right time, whether it's at the renewal or making that change with new customers to work out the kinks, and then make the change.
Awesome. We're at the top, so I'll end with one last question. Do you think there are different skills needed for someone as a digital CSM versus a traditional high-touch CSM? And if so, what kind of skills do you recommend learning?
Yeah, that's a good question. I said yes. Somebody who loves to be an enterprise customer success manager. I mean, that is really one-on-one. You're sometimes talking to an executive. You have to be strategic. You have to be talking about high value things. You can't go in there and say like, we're resolving a support issue, or what do you need me to do? You got to meet them where they're at. And so tends to be a more skilled person who's great with executives, great with talking value, great with sometimes even selling, right? I'm seeing CSMs becoming more sales oriented. The digital person, they're more comfortable, I would say, like maybe they love to do webinars in a one-to-many scenario. Maybe that digital person is a little bit more of a marketer. Like they love to do kind of that customer marketing skill. Maybe the marketing team is only working on brand and new business. So the digital person maybe likes writing those email communications. Maybe they like enabling, building kind of the PowerPoints and the tools that are needed for the CSMs on the front line. Oftentimes I'll take that digital person, move them up to mid-market CSM and then enterprise CSM.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lynn, for walking us through everything about digital CS and showing us a little bit about ChatGPT. Very interesting. And I want to thank the audience for joining us today. Just as you close out this webinar, our survey will pop up. Would appreciate if you just provide your feedback as we continue on with our webinar programming. Would love to hear what you thought. So thank you so much, Lynn, and thanks everyone for joining us. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you, Corey. And thanks to everyone. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.